use designated bags, and we have limited living space in Hong Kong, so it's not easy to save waste for recycling, and also there are not sufficient recycling facilities. At the same time, the whole process is complicated, so it adds to the workload substantially of frontline cleansing staff. And then for property management companies, if they have to comply with the scheme requirements, and management fees will have to go up. And then for 3 new buildings, there are concerns that there would be indiscriminate disposal of waste leading to environmental hygiene problems. And then for different sectors such as eating establishments and residential care homes, they may have to shoulder additional costs in the implementation of the scheme. So from the views we have collected and from the views reported in the news, we can see that there are not many people who support the scheme. About 70 to 80% are in objection to the implementation of the scheme. They propose to delay the scheme by phases, or at least until 2026. Some have even asked for the shelving of the scheme altogether. From the demonstration scheme, we can see from the EPD report that the whole waste collection process is cumbersome, and most participants in the scheme did not make good use of the distributed designated bags. This was even more obvious in the latter part of the demonstration scheme. The volume of recycled waste and the habit of waste disposal did not change much, but rather there's been a substantial additional workload for cleansing staff, and also operating costs would go up for eating establishments and residential care homes. So therefore, on the basis of the finding, the Secretary for Environment and Ecology suggested to me to delay the implementation date of the scheme. That is, we won't implement the scheme on the 1st of August. In fact, we learned from various survey findings that there is a strong reservation among the public about the implementation of the scheme, and there are not sufficient recycling facilities. And apart from these 2 points, the third point is that although there's an expansion of the recycling network, the expansion is still limited. Fourthly, the current waste charging scheme gives the wrong impression that the government is trying to raise revenue from the scheme. Fifthly, the workload of frontline staff and also the stress will be substantially increased. Sixthly, economic recovery is not as fast as expected. If we implement the charging scheme now, it will lead to immense pressure to the business sector, including the catering sector. That's why I agree with the Secretary for Environment and Ecology. So I have in turn put forward a recommendation to the Chief Executive, and the recommendation is accepted by the Chief Executive. So we now announce that the government will delay the implementation of the charging scheme on the 1st of August. We will be publishing a notice by Gazette to scrap the implementation date of the 1st of August. We will also repeal the reference notice on the charging scheme. The government will be enhancing public education and improving recycling. We will also consider other ways of enhancing the waste charging scheme. In a moment, I will invite my my colleague to further explain our initial ideas to you. Now, we will monitor the habit change of the public in waste disposal. We believe we cannot rush to change the habits or behavior of the over 7 million people over a short period of time. We expect this to be a lengthy process. We will report the work, our progress in mid-2025, and we'll see whether there is enhanced participation by the public in the scheme, and we will also listen to members' views. Now I'll invite SEE, Mr. Chair, to brief you on our work plan for the coming year. Mr. Chair. Chairman, members. The demonstration scheme findings, views of the public, and the news reports show that we do not have the right condition to implement the municipal solid waste charging scheme. So we need to substantially improve recycling facilities. We need to promote a much stronger recycling culture in the community. Now, we want to change the habit of over 7 million people in Hong Kong. It is a major challenge. It involves work on many different fronts, so we need to do so progressively. We will not be ready in a short space of time. But then the government has always been committed to reducing waste. We will continue to promote waste reduction and separation of waste for recycling. The demonstration scheme provided us with much useful information. In the past 2 months, we learned more about the views of the public, and in fact, some in the community are starting to learn how to recycle, separate and recycle kitchen waste or food waste. So the 2 months of the demonstration scheme were useful indeed. And then we will continue to promote further public education. We will substantially reduce waste at source. At the same time, we will consider how we could enhance the various schemes and consider the various issues identified. We will keep reviewing the progress of our work, and we'll assess public participation or public buy-in of the concept. As the Deputy Chief Secretary mentioned, we will give you another report in the middle of next year. Now I will briefly explain our work in the coming year. Since the assumption of office of this term of government, we have substantially increased recycling facilities. We have already provided more public collection points. There were 170 public housing estates covered. And now there are over 200 public rental housing estates with food waste recycling bins. And then for private estates, housing estates, we also are helping them to set up recycling bins. There are over 30,000 eating establishments in Hong Kong. We still do not have enough collection points for food waste in this for this trade. So we will keep expanding our recycling network. And then we hope that we will be able to recycle 1/3 of municipal solid waste. That's our target. In private residential estates, especially large ones, we will be adding more food waste recycling facilities. We hope that within a year, we'll be able to double the number of such facilities. And then in the coming year, we're going to set up another 100 mobile food waste collection points, and in refuse collection points, we'll be setting up such recycling bins. So there will be more channels for the public to learn how to separate waste and recycle food waste. So we will closely monitor the usage rate of the food waste recycling facilities. At where there's a high usage, we will be providing more such bins. We will also extend the operating hours of recycling points, and we will increase the number of greener community points from 200 to 800. We are going to enhance the appeal of recycling. So for the Green Dollar Incentive Scheme, we are considering whether we can turn the dollars into vouchers. And then the APD has also implemented a waste separation of waste at source scheme for for over 1,200 commercial buildings. We have implemented the scheme, but then the feedback we got is that the recycling bins are not properly managed, and recyclables are instead treated as waste by cleaning workers. So we need to make better use of our vast network of recycling facilities. So there will be a waste reduction charter. We encourage property management companies to sign the charter. They will then undertake to collect recyclables properly for handling by relevant recycling contractors. We will also encourage the public to learn to separate waste for recycling. So starting from the 1st of June, in the next 6 months, with for in public rental estates, housing estates, we will give them 20 designated bags to help them to get into the habit of separating waste or reducing waste, and then we hope that they'll be able to use the 20 designated bags for disposal of waste. There's no need for them to use additional bags. So because these are then the frontline workers need not change the way they handle waste. For private buildings, I mentioned the waste reduction and recycling charter. And so private property management companies can sign the charter so that recyclables could be collected for disposal. And then the designated bags could be distributed to private housing estates. And apart from providing designated bags, the green outreach teams and green at communities will all chip in to educate residents in private buildings on how to separate waste and recycle waste. We'll also monitor the use of designated bags. We'll see if there's any reduction in waste disposal or increase in recyclables. So we'll monitor if habit is changing. Now we need to step up publicity and education for the whole community. So the EPD will work with different trade associations, schools, and so on to keep publicizing waste reduction and recycling. The demonstration scheme and views expressed in the community showed up various problems. We will consider all these problems very carefully. We'll see how we can enhance the waste charging scheme. Most importantly, we will make sure that frontline cleaning workers won't be held legally liable, and we need to remove any obstacles in the scheme. We need to consider the design of the designated banks and improve the whole process, and we will also consider whether we could adopt a progressive approach in implementing scheme. The aim is for the public to embrace the scheme better and to make life easier for frontline workers. Now, the government is speeding up its effort to build modern incinerators. So by 2035, we will stop using landfills. We are also considering integrated approach. Integration with the Greater Bay Area, so together we could build a waste-free Greater Bay Area. So in mid-2025, we will again report our work to the panel, and we'll see whether it's more buy-in from the public and also report on the progress of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Secretary for Administration and Secretary. Just now, the Secretary mentioned suspending the scheme, but then the government will not stop waste reduction. There will also be a roadmap and review of the current practice. In 1 year's time, the government will report the work of the progress. Members have already pressed the button to speak. Mr. Tong Ni-che. I'm a member of the panel. I've been seated here for a long time. Well, I will now first read out the order of members. Dr. Teck Chi-Yuen, Mr. Benson Look, Stephen Ho, Michael Tien, Mr. Tommy Zhang, Mr. Chan Hak-kan, Mr. Michael Tien, Mr. Kissen Yang, Mr. Rebecca Chan, Mr. Lee Chen Kang, Ms. Chan Ka-pui, Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, Mr. Kwok Loi Kang, Dr. Yaman Yu, Mr. Ronick Chang, Ms. Carmen Khan, Ms. Eunice Yong, Ms. Doreen Kong, Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Andrew Lam, Mr. Gary Zhang, Mr. Robert Lee, Ms. Professor Priscilla Leung. In a moment, well, that's all for the members who are going to speak. In the interest of time, 3 minutes for each member. Question and answers included. Dr. Teck Chi-Yuen. Thank you, Chairman. Several days ago, we received a report and I felt that it was full of errors. It mentioned a lot of problems, but there wasn't any solution. We always say that there are always more solutions than problems, but then the paper was silent on solutions. Just now, the Secretary briefed us on the work in the coming year. I support it. Well, I think the government is pragmatic. It has taken a pragmatic approach. If what the government had said had been implemented a year ago, the MSW charging scheme would have been much smoother right now. We have wasted 2 years' time. But anyway, I commend the government. I appreciate the government's being pragmatic. I have prepared a speech to criticize the government. But right now, I think the government is worth my support. I'd like the Secretary to clarify regarding waste reduction. I believe there are too many problems, but the government, will you press ahead with the policy? I hope the Secretary will once again tell us again. Well, there are many discussions about patients in residential care homes, frontline care workers. I hope you will think over these problems once again. In 1 year's time, what will happen? We don't know. The Secretary, can you tell us, after your work for 1 year, do you have any indicator, any KPI? With KPIs, we will be confident that we can implement a plan. Otherwise, in the absence of any KPIs, this is not ideal. You should have KPIs. Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, I already said that the government has never changed in its policy intent to reduce waste. We will definitely promote waste reduction and separation of waste, as well as the recycling of waste. Apart from recycling network and publicity, we will also study how to enhance our scheme and address the problems identified. Dr. Tick just now mentioned any stakeholders, any trades, they have financial burden, and the MSW charging scheme will not encourage them to reduce waste. We'll cover this point in our plan as well. Well, what about any KPI? Do you have any KPIs? In our work, I have told you many figures, and we do have KPIs for our 1-year work plan. But it's all about the culture in society. So we need to evaluate the culture in society, and I'm not going to call it a KPI. In 1 year's time, we will discuss this in the council. Next, Mr. Benson Look. Thank you, Chairman. The BPA and I support waste reduction, but we won't underestimate the difficulty and challenges in changing the habit of citizens. The government's plan has responded to the challenges in the community. There was much publicity in the community. And I believe this should still be the direction. That is, we should reduce waste, and we should dump less and save more. In the questionnaire surveys, in page 12 and 13, there was actually positive results. For example, 100% of them used the designated bags of the government. Waste disposed of also decreased by 10 to 20%. There was positive response for these two groups of people. 40% of the residential care homes workers think that implementing MSW charging is difficult. It affects the workflow. However, for workers of government buildings think that there is no difficulty. There isn't any additional responsibility either. How do we explain the difference? Is it because of the different types of waste, hence the differences? In the selected premise of government buildings, it seems quite easy for the workers working there. There was also positive result. In the first 2 months, there was a reduction of 10% of waste. This is a very good result. Will the administration consider how to encourage waste reduction? Meanwhile, in some appropriate government departments, will you implement trial schemes or demonstration schemes? Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the questions. The reason for full compliance of residential care homes and government departments is that the management gave directions. For households, residents need to take the initiative, hence the differences. For government buildings, the reason why staff members find that it is not difficult is that not every single staff member also needs to use a designated bag. Instead, cleansing workers use designated bags to collect waste. So there's not much difference. For the reduction of waste of 10%, there is no difference in the workflow. Instead, in that period of time, we encourage staff members to reduce waste. So we need to encourage waste reduction through publicity. In different scenarios, there are different methods to achieve waste reduction. We will also cover this point in our studies. In the interest of time, if the Secretary has sufficient time, the Secretary will respond further. Mr. Stephen Ho, please switch on the mic for Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you. DAB held a press conference. The theme is to suspend MSW charging. We need to pragmatically reduce waste. The government presses ahead with waste reduction, and MSW charging is simply a means. But then the public may think that MSW charging becomes the main policy intent. This is probably due to a lack of publicity. I'm glad to learn from the government that we have adjusted the direction moving forward. The administration has also identified a couple of pain points. In some trades, there are difficulties in the rollout of the scheme. If these policies can be implemented and we can achieve our ultimate aim of waste reduction, will MSW charging be once again rolled out? Well, we can discuss it later in the future. Regarding changing the consumption pattern of the public, the government needs to learn the lesson. Like we groom children, we need carrot and stick approach. We do need to promote environmental protection, so we need to strike a better balance between using a stick and a carrot approach. For example, the green dollars can be used to redeem government consumption vouchers. What about vouchers of government services, for example, vehicle license plate services and so on? In a year's time, the administration will come back to the Legislative Council to report the work. I don't think it's time to talk about MSW charging. Instead, we need to talk about waste reduction. There may be people with ulterior motive which will criticize the government. We can see many different plans of the administration. Whenever we talk about waste reduction, the government needs to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, but we may not be able to achieve our aim. It seems that the administration has focused on public housing estates. For village houses, private housing, as well as 3 new buildings, I hope I will see more initiatives from the government. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Stephen Ho. On publicity, we'll definitely cover the entire territory. On the distribution of designated bags, it's not limited to public housing estates. As I mentioned, there will also be private housing estates. When they take part in our charter and are committed to waste reduction, we will also provide free designated bags. We want to extend publicity. we want to encourage them to take the first step. Next, Mr. Tommy Zhang. Thank you, Secretary. The government, not least the EEB, should not focus on penalizing the public. When you suspend the scheme, I'd like to talk about a carrot and stick approach. How should we encourage the public? How can we give the public more carrots, so to speak? After all, environmental protection is an issue that we must face squarely. For people like us in our age bracket, we have seen different resources being used, so we do need to encourage waste reduction. It's of course fine to sign a charter, but in private housing estates or in public housing estates, should we set up more green and community stations with solar panels? Housing estates, be they public or private. For green dollars, do you call it green dollars? You mentioned expanding the green dollar program to allow them to redeem different gifts. I think this is indeed good. But regarding the F&B industry, under this ordinance, some eateries do not have to pay. However, some restaurants told me that their expenses increased from $3,000 to $9,000 or even $10,000. That is a twofold increase in their waste disposal fees. Well, I think you should look into the situation. When you once again roll out the charging scheme, you may have to look into the scheme once again. When giving carrots to the public or to the industry, you should start with medium to large-scale restaurants. We have food waste of 1,000 tons or so per day. For those who are willing to work on separation of waste, of course, the medium to large-scale eateries find it no problem. It's of course the best to waive these fees. Can you charge just half of these fees? This is also a carrot approach for workers of restaurants, for glass, plastics, food waste. These are more difficult to be handled. Can you cover all these as well? The FEHD is also under your purview. So, can it be modeled on the public transport system? For example, you can deduct their points. You can also use the same model. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Well, this Secretary will first jot down your views, and they will come back and report later because we're really running out of time. Mr. Gary Chen. Well, I think it's a pragmatic approach for the government to shelve the MFW charging scheme. I hope it's only you're just shelving the scheme. You must not stop your work in achieving the waste reduction target. In the past 6 months or so, since you announced the implementation of the charging scheme, people in Hong Kong became so concerned about waste reduction. It's never happened in the past. And so there is much keener public interest on this topic. Maybe initially you were only able to collect about a ton or so of food waste each day, but now it's gone up to some 50 tons or so. So there's a substantial increase. That means the public are now starting to pay attention to environmental protection. So you may be shelving the scheme, but you must not stop your green effort. This is the most important. And then you should take this opportunity to keep people engaged in the green effort. For household on household waste, 1/3 of that is actually food waste. If we can do a good job in recycling food waste, then I'm sure we will be able to substantially reduce domestic waste. And also that could be recycling of paper, glass bottles, plastic bottles too. And that means we can reduce waste further. That's the first point. Second point, now we are resorting to charging as a way to promote waste reduction. It is like a punitive measure. Once you want to charge people, people will come up with various ways to evade the charge. Instead, perhaps you could consider giving rewards or incentives, and then people will look at the whole matter far more positively. Maybe at communities or with your green dollar incentive scheme and so on. And the DAB has been suggesting that for green dollars saved up, they could be used for paying, say, electricity tariffs, rates, or for redeeming vouchers and so on. I think that will be very appealing to the public, and then we'll be able to reduce waste as a whole. And then waste hand management is not just an issue for Hong Kong. We should consider the whole Greater Bay Area as a whole. So that's all I'd like to say. Any response from the Secretary? We thank Mr. Chan for his views. As I explained, during this period, we see a much keener public interest in waste recycling. And there's more public participation. In the past few months, we managed to collect 3 times more food waste. So we will keep expanding our recycling network and keep doing better education and publicity. And for the Greater Bay Area, yes, so we will promote an integrated approach in handling waste for the whole Bay Area. Mr. Michael Tan. Well, waste reduction means waste charging plus waste recycling. We've been talking about waste charging for over 2 decades, and there's been repeated delays, and only in 2023 that we passed, 2021 we passed the bill. Now the government has been focusing on the charging scheme instead of on waste separation and recycling. So there's a need to separate waste for recycling. We need to do more there. 2 weeks ago, I went to a function. I was the speaker. I said the waste charging scheme was not about poll tax, sort of. It's not about people having to pay to dispose of waste, but rather it's about people doing good job in waste recycling, and so they don't have to pay. But then there are people who are lazy, they don't care, they just dump waste in the bag, they will just pay for the bags. You know, in Canada, if you don't sort your waste and there's no recycling, then no one will collect your waste. And then in Hong Kong, the government is saying that you can pay and then you could mix your waste. And if you don't want to pay, then you separate waste. Then after I spoke, some came up and asked, so you mean that's actually the case? I don't have to pay for waste as long as I will recycle waste? So people didn't even know that before they heard that from me. So you've been doing a poor job really with your publicity and education. In any case, so far we've only had the demonstration scheme, and people are only hearing about the scheme. And then the government has also announced a blueprint that by 2035 we will no longer be using landfill, and now you don't have a time frame for implementing the charging scheme. You may not be using designated bags, and so you have distributed you'll be distributing bags to public rental housing for the next 6 months. But then if it's not going to make a difference about the bags you use, who would bother? So we will be back to square one. We have limited landfill space, and even if we rely on incinerators, we may not be able to dispose of all waste. I've always asked the government to distribute designated bags to the community for 3 months, but now we have seen various issues. That's why I agree we shouldn't proceed with the scheme on the 1st of August. So the roundtable asked the government to consider something else. From the 1st of January 2025, you should implement the scheme, but in the first year, you will require everyone to use 3 designated bags. And that's a grace period, and there will be no prosecution. If anyone is caught not following the requirement, there won't be prosecution, there won't be fine, but warning letters will be issued. So people know in future you have the capacity to enforce the law. And there could be more classes of charge exemption for special groups. They don't need to respond to my views. And we are the only one who is saying that we shouldn't give up on the scheme. So Mr. Tan has put forward his views to the administration. Please consider the views. Next, Mr. Kitson-Yen. Thank you. The new government has spent no effort in promoting recycling and environmental protection. We can all see that. We're glad to see the government is taking on board the views of the public, because we've been doing questionnaires in the past months or so. Our colleagues have been helping with that exercise, and we know what the data is like. So the government is deferring the waste recharging scheme, but I'm glad to see the government will proceed still with this recycling effort. There will be more food waste, recycling bins and other recycling facilities. That's a good idea. Now, you say you're going to distribute free designated bags to public rental housing estates, so people learn how to recycle waste. But then, apart from PRH estates, maybe we should promote the awareness of recycling among the public in terms of community education. As for the food waste recycling bins, I understand the government has a plan to reduce the number of households for an estate that's eligible for applying for the recycling bins. For example, in Kowloon City, there's a development with only 140 households. They are keen to recycle food waste, but they are not eligible to apply for the food waste recycling bins. So maybe you can consider reducing the number of households in a development. So various developments could also be equipped with food recycling bins. On incineration, there are 2 incineration facilities. But then the volume they can handle is small. In Singapore, they have incineration facilities with a huge capacity. They can even dig out waste from landfills for incineration. So do we have a way out in integration with the Greater Bay Area rather than just focusing on incineration? So after incineration, is it the case that we will then address the shortage of landfill space? If it's the case, then do we still need to consider charging? I hope the government will consider this in its review. Thank you. Secretary? Thank you, Mr. Yang, for your views. In our review, definitely, we will carefully consider your views. Community education, definitely, we're going to step it up. Food waste recycling bins. We will consider lowering the threshold for the provision of food waste recycling bins. As I mentioned, in the next year, we're going to expand the number of food waste recycling facilities and it will double the number. On incineration, I mentioned also earlier that we're going to speed up our effort to build modern incinerators. We will go back to the EA panel to give a report on the progress for the second incinerator. For the first incinerator, it will be completed next year. Greater Bay Area, we are going to promote integration of waste management for the whole Bay Area. Next, Ms. Rebecca Chen. Thank you. I think the Secretary and his team have listened to the views of the public. That's important. They are also adopting a pragmatic approach, because my office has done a survey, and the finding is that more than 70% of the public would like to see the delay of the scheme. They would like to see more support facilities first. And most importantly, now we're able to bring the people together, so we all move towards the goal of environmental protection. Secretary, you've told us a series of tasks that you're going to embark on. Now, on distribution of designated bags, 20 bags per unit for public rental housing estate. But I've said this many times, you shouldn't try to divide people in different classes when it comes to environmental protection and recycling. So why you are still just focusing on PRH estates? with free distribution of designated bags. On the demonstration scheme, I received feedback from residential care homes. They face immense problems with recycling because the items they dispose of cannot be recycled. For example, diapers. So will you have special measures for the residential care homes? They do want to recycle waste, but how can you help them achieve that? Food waste recycling bins, that's the third point. You say you're going to double the number of such bins. Will you again just focus on PRH estates? I kept mentioning Meifu Sanchun is the largest private housing development in Hong Kong. There are 99 blocks. Definitely, they should be provided with food recycling bins. Now, yes, you may be rolling out the waste reduction charter. Still, would you consider providing food recycling bins to more private developments?
Secretary, thank you, Ms. Rebecca Chan. We don't just distribute designated bags in public rental housing estates. For private housing estates that have signed the charter, we will also provide designated bags free of charge. We want to incentivize private housing estates to engage in waste reduction. So it also applies to private housing estates. On food waste, we don't just increase the number of bins in public housing estates. We also increase the number of facilities in private housing estates. And there will also be 100 more recycling points. In 100 refuse collection points, we will also provide more facilities. So this is not only applicable to public housing estates. We will enhance our recycling network. So I look forward to more collaboration between private housing estates and green and community facilities. Next, Mr. Lee Chen-kung. Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see that the administration has taken on board our views. It is pragmatic to shelve the MSW charging scheme. When it comes to waste reduction as source, how to handle waste, I believe members of the public know this well. But do we really need to adopt the punitive measures? Actually, Mr. Tommy Zhang also mentioned we should actually use reward schemes. For example, you can give applicants waiting for public housing estates more points. This can incentivize them. When you resume MSW charging scheme in the future, I hope the administration will also make amendments to the law. So frontline cleansing workers, owners corporation, they will be exempted from legal liabilities so that they do not have to work under pressure or worry. You also mentioned publicity or public education. Well, we need to implement the scheme in phases. For example, for industrial buildings, they have less food waste, and then we can move on to other types of building, say to industrial buildings. Through technologies, we can add RFID to bags. It's not expensive at present. This way, we can track the location of the designated bags. Today, these designated bags have become just ordinary bags. We should take advantage of this opportunity to adopt the principle of polluter pays principle as well as waste reduction as source. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Lee, for your suggestions. Indeed, while enhancing our scheme, there are many factors at play. We do need to consider all these factors. For example, how to exempt frontline workers from their legal liabilities and making their job easier. This is indeed an issue that we need to solve. Regarding using a carrot approach instead of a stick approach, we can consider more methods. But first of all, we need to take into account the fiscal position of the government. We need to tread cautiously. Will it give rise to problems about fairness? We keep an open mind. We will consider all options. When it comes to using technology, we will also explore that. Next, Ms. Judy Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Although the government is going to shelve the plan, that is, it's not going to be rolled out on August 1st, I'd like to commend Mr. Chair and your team for your hard work. I understand that you have done a lot. Over the past few months, you met with the public. You held quite a number of talks in order to deepen the public understanding of the scheme. You have done quite a lot of surveys. The New People's Party also conducted some surveys or some opinion polls. We have identified similar public views. Our findings are similar. That is, the public may ask, why do we have to spend more instead? It seems that the government does not have the same goal as the public. The administration needs to tell the public the policy intent. So we should capitalize on this opportunity. When the public attaches great importance to environmental protection, we should take advantage of this. For example, there are many designated bags. We can distribute these bags to the public for free. In the public housing estates or for private housing estates that have signed a charter, or for people who support environmental protection, how can you encourage them to sign up for the Green Dollar scheme? You can give them designated bags for free. You can hold more workshops. When you attend the workshops, you will be given designated bags for free. So we shouldn't stop our public education work right here. There may be hiccups, but we do need to press ahead with our public education initiatives. How to make the public confident in the plan? We need to tell the public our policy intent. That way, we can enhance the level of public participation. The Secretary mentioned adding more food waste bins and collection points in the community. I hope there will be a KPI for the percentage of food waste, not just for the Legislative Council, but a KPI for the public. That is, we need to reduce food waste. We had a discussion item in a panel. That is the proper collection of domestic waste. Will the shelving of the scheme also impact on another scheme? Secretary. Thank you, Member. We need to study many different aspects in order to make enhancements. For example, for legislation in relation to waste management, how can we better implement waste management measures? Of course, we won't stop. We will definitely press ahead with our work. Ms. Elizabeth Cott. Thank you, Chairman. The administration has gained a lot of experience with the demonstration scheme, hence the decision to shelve the plan. I think this is a good decision in that the administration has taken on board the public views. instead of pressing ahead with the scheme. I do support environmental protection work. We support waste reduction as source, so when the government floated the idea of MSW charging, we were of the view that it was difficult. With the experience over the last few months, it proved the DAB's questions in Bills Committee. It shows that the DAB has all along been pragmatic in Bills Committee meetings. It's not about the concept of the MSW charging. Is it correct? Is it not correct? No, it's not about the concept, but it's about whether it can be rolled out pragmatically. That's exactly why we're worried about the rollout of the scheme. So when the government is going to roll out policies, you do need to consider the implementation aspect. Otherwise, this will be considered a public disturbance to the community. As many members have said, the community has a heightened awareness of environmental protection. After the waste is recycled, will they be sent to landfills or will it be recycled? That's the question of the public. And must we use the MSW charging method and designated bags? It's worth our discussion. We can further explore this area. Instead of rolling out punitive measures, we should consider giving rewards to the public. It's good that the administration has green dollar scheme. There were over 500,000 participants of the scheme. There are actually a lot of members of the public who are not aware of the green dollar scheme. Apart from redeeming for instant noodles, oils, we should also consider cash incentives to attract more members of the public to take part in the scheme. Actually, many more members of the public will be more willing to take part in the scheme if there are more rewards such as vouchers and so on. I'm glad to learn about the integration of resources in the GBA that was first floated by the DAB, that is the waste-free GBA. I hope the government will implement this. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. At the initial stage of the demonstration scheme, the FTU already appealed to the participants to do well in the demonstration scheme, so we can better plan the MSW charging scheme. That will also give us some background information. There are, however, rumors in society that is, for example, the scheme wouldn't be rolled out according to the schedule. According to a report given by the administration, there are more members of the public who get the designated bags than those who use the DBs. For frontline cleansing workers, their workload has increased dramatically. This is a fact. This is what we were told by cleansing workers. On Labor Day, that is the 1st of May, the Secretary went to the public housing estates in Chai Wan to speak to cleansing workers in the front line. Frontline workers expressed their views to the administration. Their feedback is worth our reference. Waste reduction and environmental protection are the global trend. We lack recycling facilities. Members of the public need a longer time to learn and adapt to this new culture, so the administration has already shelved the plan and given the public a longer time. If we are going to shelve the plan owing to objective circumstances, how can we build an objective standard from scratch in order to press ahead with the government policies? It's actually difficult to have a perfect facility or recycling network. It's indeed a challenge. But does it mean that we will not be able to implement the scheme and it is not perfect? Many members of the public may think that we no longer have the straitjacket when we have shelved the plan. But does it mean that we will have an easy way forward? Our landfills are still going to be exhausted. This is looming on the horizon. So how can we continue with our waste reduction work? How can we further promote the green-collar industries? Ms. Jovi Chan also mentioned some property management companies had increased the amount of management fees. Will the administration appeal to OCs to better regulate the management fees? Thank you.
Well, Secretary, please consider these views further. Mr. Scott Leung. Thank you, Chairman. Now the government's collect views from the public, the business sector and so on, and now it's decided to shelve the introduction of the charging scheme on the 1st of August. Well, that's given some relief to the public because people were really concerned. In the opening remarks of the DCS and the Secretary, they said that there is not yet strong enough culture on recycling. So I think it's a matter of expanding the recycling network to further promote the culture of recycling. It's not the case that people don't care about recycling. I don't agree. Now, this is Meifu Sanqun. Every Wednesday, there is a mobile collection point. People have to wait an hour or half an hour to hand in their recyclables. You can see that their baskets are full. So it's not the case that people don't care about recycling. It's just that there are insufficient recycling facilities in a particular district, so people's interest is dampened in a way. So it's time. So that's why you must now focus on improving the recycling network. You need to have more recycling points, and then you could build the recycling culture. Green dollar. How do we improve the appeal of green dollars so people will recycle more? In Sham Shui Po, there is a care team that's engaging in recycling. They collect, say, small electrical appliances, clothing, and so on from the middle class sector, and then at the grassroots community, they do recycling, and people could exchange their recyclables for such items, and it's very popular. So that's another way to promote recycling. I hope the government will continue with this effort. And then when we try to collect views from restaurants and so on, well, they were given free designated bags. So when we ask them how they recycle food waste, there may be an RCP that's closer by, but they are asked to go to a further away RCP to send their food waste. So it's about disseminating correct information. This is important. And then in the coming year, the government has just briefed us on the plans in taking forward its work. So maybe after a year, you can tell us, perhaps to give us a list of the tasks you're going to embark upon, and then we can see after a year whether they are accomplished or not. Mr. Ronik Chen, thank you. The government wants to reduce waste by implementing the charging scheme. In fact, the public would all like to contribute to environmental protection. Now, since the start of the demonstration scheme on the 1st of January, many said that at this stage they are encountering difficulties, so that's why I support the government's decision. Now, if we look at the waste reduction effort in other places, the first step is publicity and education, promoting change in habit, and then an incentives. The next step is an incentive scheme for better recycling. Only the third step is users pays principle, like a charging scheme. Now, the government has done much in publicity and education in the past few months. Incentive scheme, I hope the government will do more there, because after giving reward, then the last step is punishing those who would not cooperate, and that means charging. So in the second stage, the government needs to do more in terms of incentives. Now, from the demonstration scheme, a host of issues was identified, and we can see in your paper you've only given your observations and the findings, but you have not come up with solutions, in particular targeted solutions. So next year when you come back to give a report, you should tell us what your solutions are in response to the issues identified in the demonstration scheme. I'm sure members would be keen to see that. And then you need to give us a roadmap for the coming year. And under what circumstances would you again consider introducing the charging scheme, so people know you will only consider charging again when all the conditions are ripe. I'm sure people would like to have a roadmap too. So any response, please, Secretary? Any targeted solutions, any roadmap? Actually, you have spoken on that a bit just now, earlier on. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Well, you can see we are now trying to focus on publicity, education, and incentives, and then before we decide how we should enhance the charging scheme. The demonstration scheme has made available various information for us, so we'll see what we need to do. So in the coming months, we'll see how we could enhance the various measures. In particular, the legal liability of frontline workers, the difficulties they enhance, how do we handle bulky waste items, and it's the case that some people are unable to afford the designated bags, and the design of designated bags, and can we adopt a progressive approach in the implementation of charging and so on. So we'll look at all these issues in the coming year. Deputy Chairman, Mr. Chen Su-hong. I understand why the government wants to delay the implementation of the charging scheme. The government is trying to be pragmatic. If it forces through the scheme, it's not practical. So therefore, you are delaying the scheme, and you only come back to give a report in the middle of the next year. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because I can see the Secretary is determined to take forward the charging scheme. But I'm disappointed. The government says that it remains committed to waste reduction, but it seems that it doesn't have the resolve, and it's incapable of doing something. Now, we've been discussing this issue over and over again in this council after the passage of the bill. We've reminded the government to try to make sure everything is ready. We've seen 2 deferrals of the scheme. Now, there is now keen public interest in the scheme, and of course there will be plenty of opposition. You know that even before you started the demonstration scheme at 14 locations. Now we need a combination of measures to get things right. Recycling, charging, and so on. Now, we're talking about entrenched habit of waste disposal. This is a point raised in the paper, and I fully agree to that. That's why we need to keep up our publicity and education effort. We need to build the recycling network. Charging is financial means. So I have 2 questions. First, do you think distributing free designated bags works? We find that many people collected the free designated bags in the demonstration scheme, but they didn't use them. So in future, even if you distribute free designated bags, people will use both designated bags and non-designated bags. It's hard to change people's habit if the bags are free. And there are others who collect the free designated bags to save them for the future when charging scheme is in place. So how can you achieve your objective this way? And second question is, why wouldn't you consider a phased approach? Now, for government buildings or government-managed premises, we've seen good results in the demonstration scheme. Why wouldn't you consider implementing the charging scheme in these premises first? So why wouldn't you consider a phased charging scheme? Secretary, please be brief with your reply. Thank you, Chairman. The government, is very cautious in introducing the charging scheme on the basis of the findings of the demonstration scheme, and many have pointed out various issues identified. So this case is no longer just about resolve. It's about the legal requirements in the ordinance, and there are difficulties in actual implementation. So we need to sort out those issues first before we could effectively enforce the ordinance. So it's not just a question of resolve. And since we encounter so many actual implementation issues, such as the legal liability of frontline workers, the difficulties faced by workers, the financial burden on certain sectors, and so on. So these are issues that cannot be addressed by a phased approach, but rather we need to consider solutions to these problems. We need to enhance the charging scheme before we decide to take things forward. You asked whether the distribution of free designated bags would be useful. Now, in the past few months, or rather, we shouldn't overlook an important point. There are now many more people who take an interest in the waste reduction. Many are taking part in the effort. They want to use a free designated bag to help try out the charging approach. We give people 20 free designated bags a month, and we want to see if that will lead to waste reduction. So this is an useful education tool. Because then we could allow more people to experience the use of designated bags. Next, Ms. Carmen Can. Thank you. Waste management is an important subject. We've been discussing it for over 2 decades. 3 years ago, there's a law and there's a commencement date, and now we have to delay the implementation of the scheme. Like many other members, I'm disappointed. Maybe after careful consideration, the law will not help us to achieve waste reduction, and then we could dump less and save more. Now the DCS and the SEE just gave a verbal report. You say you're coming back in a year to give us a report, but what about a midterm report? Maybe half a year later, you've come up with various solutions, and maybe there's need to adjust these solutions. So could there be a midterm report? That's the first point. Secondly, CAP 603, that's the Producers Responsibility Scheme Ordinance. That's going to be a common legislative framework that's suggested in paper. I think it's something worth pursuing. And then for larger housing estates, there must be waste separation and recycle. And then for recyclables, go to the right recycling bins. Now, this is something you're going to do in the first half of the 1 year period. So maybe this is going to be an effective approach. So what is your stance on that? Third point, retailers are charging $1 for a plastic bag. So can we ask retailers to use the designated bags instead? So it depends on the shopping volume. Instead of going by the current charging scheme for designated bags, instead retailers can charge $1 for designated bags, and so this will help people to get into the habit of using designated bags. Would you consider that? 3 questions. In the coming years, you can see we have much to do. The member asked if we could give you a written report on our work. Yes, we can do that. We will provide a paper later on the list of tasks we have planned. And in the process of carrying out this task, we welcome views from members even after this meeting, so we could keep in communication as to whether there is need for further discussion at the panel. We'll leave it to the panel to decide. Retailers, can they instead give people designated bags for $1 rather than the usual plastic bags? Well, we need to change the design of the designated bags, so we will consider that later. Thank you. Ms. Eunice Young. Sorry, the speaker is not using the microphone. Now, I'm talking about a common legislative framework for a producer responsive scheme and recycling for requirement for large housing estates. Would there be a legislative framework? Well, yes, we will look at that. In our review, we'll consider the timetable. Definitely, we're going to press ahead with these tasks.
Ms. Eunice Young. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the future direction of the MSW charging scheme, I'm quite helpless. It's actually a ticking time bomb. We have plastic bag levy, we have waste reduction, we have recycling. We are going to have the second incinerator and a new incinerator in Long Ku Chau. Is actually going to be a long timeline. Public education, separation of waste sorting. Do we have enough collection points? Do we have enough publicity? We are actually on different time points. But then the government said we're going to report to the council next year. The demonstration scheme has been running for 2 months. The findings are not ideal. We fail to see any results with waste reduction at all. For some individual housing estates, we can see a reduction of waste by 10% or 20%, but for other estates, the amount is similar. The time is indeed too short. You should allow a longer space of time before you come back to the council to report to us, so that you can better promote to the commercial sector. Then they will be willing to engage in waste reduction together with you. You do need a longer time. If you're just going to come back to make a report next year, this is not responsible. You haven't yet factored in all factors, all tests, and so on. So it will definitely not be good when you're going to come back to the council 1 year later. Say 90% or odd of the people will just be against the MSW charging scheme, as said in Tai Kung Pao. You shouldn't rush into the decision that we're going to, you're going back to the council to make a report in a year's time. Well, the Secretary can respond to Ms. Eunice Young's question. She asked about coming back to the Council in 1 year's time. Thank you, Member, for your question. Regarding the demonstration scheme, we have identified many implementation issues. It's not that we didn't identify these issues. I have already detailed a series of enhancements that we'll have to make. The government does attach a lot of importance to public views. Some 80% of the members of the public did not support the MSW charging scheme, so the government definitely has to listen to the public seriously. we need to consider our strategies on waste management, resource management, and so on. MSW charging scheme is one of the options, is one of our tools in waste management. So as I mentioned, we'll expedite the construction of incinerator. By 2035, we still have the aim of not using any landfills by 2035. We haven't changed in this aim. Next, Mr. Nkong. Thank you, Deputy CS and Secretary. Thank you for listening to the public. You didn't force through this scheme. I'd like to highlight the impact of the shelving of the scheme. First, on the bags. On the contract signed with manufacturers, will there be any risks of breaching the contract? Do we need to make any compensation? Just now, the Secretary mentioned distributing designated bags for free. They will serve as publicity initiatives. But after all, they are public funds. Will the administration consider selling these bags to the public? You can sell them at a lower cost. So at least you can recover part of the cost. MSW, municipal waste covers both domestic waste and industrial waste. Domestic waste has been reduced by 10%, whereas industrial waste has increased by 2.4 times. Will the administration consider adopting a two-pronged approach? That is, using different waste reduction measures for domestic waste and industrial waste. Regarding the resolve of the administration, we have been discussing waste reduction for a long time, some 2 decades. Now that we're not going to implement the charging scheme, how can you make the public believe that you still have the resolve to implement MSW charging or waste reduction? Secretary. Our contracts with the manufacturers of designated bags do not have any requirements as to the number of bags that have to be produced. As we've said, we will distribute bags in order to promote waste reduction. If there will be a significant change in the number of bags, we will act in accordance with contract provisions. We are not falling short of any target. There is no problem at all. Regarding whether we can sell bags at a cost, we think we should start with publicity. Otherwise, selling bags or selling these designated bags will cause misunderstanding in the community. Next, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chairman. I have a couple of questions. Separation of waste reduction, these are our aim. MSW charging, this is the tool. The government has the major goal of waste reduction. We need to turn this goal into the individual goals of the public. Apart from punitive measures, we can also provide incentives. But then we shouldn't forget the goal of waste reduction, especially on an individual level. Let's not forget this point. In the report or in the demonstration scheme, you can see that for 3 new buildings or single block buildings, 3 out of the 14 selected premises belong to this category. In the paper, or as the Secretary said, how can we provide more facilities? I won't say they are not helpful, but I fail to see any targeted measures for 3 new buildings. 3 new buildings lack space for these facilities, and I think you need targeted measures, targeted strategies. Next, you're going to come back to report to us in a year's time. It's too long. I don't mean whether you have enough time or not, but then we do need both carrot and stick. The community will have a sigh of relief, but then will they let down their guard? The administration needs to send a message to the community. That is, you will continue to implement the scheme. Don't let the public let down their guard. 3 points, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Andrew Lam, for your question. Regarding 3 new buildings, we'll set up 100 collection points about food waste. And we will also set up food waste collection points and refuse collection points. And we will also increase the number of green and community facilities to 100 in order to support 3 new buildings. We have identified the problem of a lack of space, and we have covered this point as well. On the carrot and stick approach, we need to, first of all, encourage the public to change the culture, to change your habit before deciding the way forward. Next, Mr. Gary Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. 2 points from me. First, I have a suggestion. In the paper, residents do not understand that the government needs to encourage waste reduction through the scheme. This is what I also identified from residents. They consider this plan a tool to increase government revenue. But I'd like to add, apart from making clear the policy intent, we need to let the public know there will still be social costs if we are not going to press ahead with the MSW charging scheme. It is a public disturbance, and this is a difficulty right in front of us. However, if we are not going to do anything, there will be major problems for our future generations. If we need to expand landfills or if we need to construct more incinerators, there will be more costs to society. This will cause disturbance to society. So we need to send this message clearly to the public. When we shelve the plan, there will be a long-standing impact on society. On the review of the demonstration scheme, on the usage rate of designated bags, what can they tell us? Whether they're high or low, what can they tell us? You want to change the habit or behavior of citizens, but there is no economic incentive. Whether citizens use these bags or not, there is no economic incentive. What can they tell us about the behavior of citizens? They don't know whether the scheme would be shelved before the announcement of the government. Then they can still use their day-to-day bags to dispose of domestic waste. After I read the papers, I still don't quite understand what the usage rate of the designated bags can tell us. I do want to know more about it. Secretary, please. On social cost, we'll promote waste reduction through publicity. We'll do more explanation work to the public. Regarding the usage rate of designated bags, whether high or low, what can they tell us? With the management requirements, we can see a high usage rate. However, in implementation, we can identify a lot of challenges. The usage rate of designated bags among the public can tell us whether they agree to the administration on the policy. It actually reviews many issues that we need to deal with in the course of implementation, but not whether citizens like it or not. In the interest of time, a lot of members have already pressed a button, but I can allow a maximum of 3 more members to ask questions. I don't want the next meeting to be aborted. Mr. Robert Lee, Professor Priscilla Lang, and Mr. Kenneth Lau. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. I support the administration's decision to shelve the plan. This has responded to the commercial and industrial sectors. I believe members of the public definitely support environmental protection and waste reduction as source. The MSW charging scheme affects members of the public and many enterprises in Hong Kong. So how can we make sure the scheme will be pragmatic, will be in line with the reality? This is crucial. But at the same time, after delaying the scheme by 1 year, it's good that we have identified many problems with the demonstration scheme. In a year's time, how can we enhance the participation rate, expand the scope of the scheme, how to provide better support to industries, how can we better help members of the public? After all, in a year's time, probably we still can't solve all the problems, for example, the lack of recycling facilities and so on. There will still be backlash from the community. Even with promotion, publicity, we still can't solve all the problems. So in a year's time, how can you make sure we can implement the scheme? Even if we have more time, how can we obtain more support? Regarding greener community, the public can redeem daily necessities. They may not be able to redeem a lot of cash, but I do hope the administration can consider the fact that the public can redeem cash. That is a year later. Secretary, it's difficult to predict what the future holds in a year's time. We need to seize the situation we have right now. The public attaches a lot of importance to environmental protection and waste reduction as source. We need to take advantage of that. Regarding how we can expand the recycling network, how we can step up publicity, then we can gauge how much the situation has improved before we can decide the next step forward. So we work hard on this area. But the main point is that we need to solicit support in the community. So we report to the council in a year's time. Thank you.
Professor Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to say to the EB, don't be let down because it takes time to change behavior. And we need the right condition to do that. I'm glad to see the government is being pragmatic and is delaying the scheme, because now the waste charging scheme is labeled as a revenue-raising scheme, and it's hard to change that kind of perception. So we need time to do that. Well, there were 4 terms of government involved, not just one term of government. It was first proposed by Dr. Sarah Liao, and then in 2017, the bill was introduced into this council. I know this term government has no choice but to take on board the task, or to take up the task, rather. And it's about changing perception, it's about changing awareness. And the community is not ready. In 2000, we set up an association because we needed to, and then because we wanted to promote green awareness, and so that's why we suggested green procurement, and now there's green auditing even. So the whole process takes time. Now with the deferral of this waste charging scheme, I hope the company will appreciate we're not just abolishing the scheme altogether, but rather it's about whether we should achieve the objective by charging. Suggested some say incentives will help. Now we have my organization, several shops in Happy Valley. I see people will carry recyclables there, even if they need a long walk. And I'm talking about a green council. We run several recycling stores. So I see people are actually keen to send in their recyclables. They're not doing that for the incentive. But then there are others who won't pay for waste disposal. I don't think we should politicize the whole issue. That's the important point. And don't negate all our effort in promoting environmental protection. But it's about having the right condition and taking a progressive approach. There are many bills that waited for more than a decade, and when is the right time for us to commence these ordinance? I think we have to do it through education. I'm sure there will be progress eventually. Now, remember those days, there's this litter bug. That in those days we tried to project littering as we projected littering as something bad, and because it was spread disease and so on. And so I hope you have to wait till the committee is ready. Thank you. Next, Mr. Tony Chen. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I think the government is being pragmatic in delaying the implementation of the municipal solid waste charging scheme. There's no point steamrolling through the scheme. It will just lead to more public discontent. I do believe that the government has not been doing enough, far from being enough in in supporting the commencement of the legislation. So we are disappointed. But then we need to look forward. We need to show the public that the government is determined to reduce waste. So maybe there could be regular announcement on waste disposal in Hong Kong, because we all for waste reduction, we will all contribute to that. But now you're not doing enough, or we are all not doing enough. So we need to let people see that. And on the design of the designated bag, definitely it needs to be changed. We want the bag to serve multiple purposes, but right now this bag is only for identification purpose, that is, people have paid for charging, and so it's just a single purpose bag is not good enough. The government must learn from the lessons, and so in future together we will all contribute to waste reduction. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your views. Implementation is very important. That's why we put in place a demonstration scheme. We wanted to identify shortcomings in the implementation arrangements, and now we've identified many issues and problems, so we need to enhance the scheme further before we could implement it. And on the government's commitment to waste reduction, well, that remains our commitment, and we will continue to promote waste reductions. So we're going to step up publicity and education. We're also going to substantially expand the recycling network. Hopefully then everyone could do more to reduce waste. You asked if we could regularly publish figures on waste disposal so people can see if there's any progress. Yes, we can do that. we can see published figures on waste reduction and recycling, so people know if there's any progress. And we'll also consider improving the design of designated bags, and maybe the bags will become multi-purpose. So we will consider all the details. Thank you. Thank you, members. We are running out of time. We should have started the second meeting, otherwise the meeting will be aborted. 26 members had a chance to speak. I and some other members were not able to speak today, but then we all agree that the government is taking on board public views. It's shelving the waste charging scheme and is going to instead embark on a number of efforts. Now the government is going to table two pieces of subsidy legislation. That is a commencement notice for the revenue ordinance, and also another commencement notice on the charging another charging scheme. The government is going to table these two items. If members have no objection, well, the government will take forward the two items. And if there's nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. 3 minutes later, we will immediately proceed to the meeting of the panel on environmental affairs.
喂，我行 DIY。
好，或者大家有啲邊度有提問？
司長啊
TVB
兩位想請教翻，其實政府點樣評估今次係咪自己真係錯判嘅營收，或者即係做得唔夠功夫，而導致再第三度押後啦？另外就係其實見到頭先會上面都冇講到一個好清楚嘅指標，究竟嚟緊1年嘅工作會做成點，再決定係咪推行個徵費。其實而家政府係會諗住點樣啦？會唔會預即係下年再推行，定係都係無限期擱置咁樣咧？
或者我答第一條問題啊，咁其餘嗰個問題或者請局長幫手回答。頭兩次我哋嗰個宣佈押後咧，其實係有好充分嘅理由。第一次押後咧係即係原本大家記得咧，就係喺舊年年底做啦。咁但係咧呢個清潔業界咧就講俾我哋聽，係嗰陣時會係咧拋棄垃圾嘅高峰期。咁而員工方面咧，亦都會喺年底至到農曆新年之間咧，好多員工咧係會請假嘅。咁所以咧，佢哋係覺得會好難應付。咁所以咧，我哋係因應業界嘅要求咧，係押後。咁第二次押後咧，就係1月19號咧就宣布咧係喺將4月1號就褪到8月1號。咁因為我哋咧喺年初嘅時候咧，亦都係聽到好多市民嘅一啲嘅意見。 咁我哋覺得咧，我哋需要咧通過一個好認真、好深入嘅先行先試咧，去揾出我哋如果係執行呢條法例，喺實際上咧各個不同持份者佢會遇到啲咩問題，咁然後咧就亦都我哋係嗰個先行先試咧，亦都係會收集呢個參與者嘅意見。咁正如頭先我喺立法會講啦，咁我哋做完8個星期嘅先行先試之後咧，咁我哋得到好多好有用嘅數據同埋資料。先行先試嗰個好處，雖然好多人話，先行先試好似嗰個啲個結果同預料差唔多啫咁，但係問題咧，即係我哋呢一個垃圾徵費咧，係呢個非常之一個重要嘅舉措。我哋一定係要係有一個根據比較科學咁樣去嚟做一個決定。咁所以咧，先行先試咧就俾咗呢一個提供咗一啲資料俾我哋。咁亦都咧係通過先行先試我哋得出嚟嘅一啲嘅結果咧，係加深咗市民對於實施垃圾收費嘅認識。咁亦都咧係增加咗我哋政府係喺呢件事上面去做一個決定嗰個透明度同埋呢個認受性。其餘兩個問題或者我請局長回答。
嗱，政府我哋推動減廢回收呢個初心咧係唔會變嘅，亦都從來冇改變。咁所以喺呢方面咧，政府我哋會繼續努力嚟到係推動減廢同埋回收。咁但係我哋喺今次先行先試裏邊咧我哋真係見到即係一方面就真係有好多具體一啲嘅實際上係執行上面嘅問題。我哋見到而家法例上面嘅要求都有好多地方，我哋真係需要優化咁呢個係一個方面。咁但係對於一個嘅垃圾收費，佢係咪係幾時或者咩情況底下我哋可以做咧？咁亦都唔係純粹係一個即係一個硬件，即係呢個嘅回收配套一個嘅問題。我哋見到係需要社會真係有一個足夠嘅一個嘅支持度咁樣先至係可以去做。咁所以未來我哋嘅工作咧透過呢個嘅先行先試，同埋我哋坊間收集到嘅資料意見嘅話咧，未來我哋就第一，我哋要加強我哋個宣傳教育咧因為我覺得呢一個係為我哋個社會讓我哋市民去能夠明白了解去推動減廢回收嘅重要性讓大家社會有一個足夠嘅成熟度讓我哋去推嘅時候，呢個係重要嘅。咁第二點有啲比較硬件嘅嘢啦，就係減廢回收嘅配套啦。咁所以喺一方面未來一年呢，我哋會大力喺方面呢，我哋嚟到去做工作頭先我都有講過啦我哋會喺廚餘方面未來一年，我哋咧係會將我哋嘅廚餘收集我哋嗰個整個設施咧係會增加1倍我哋亦都會咧即係喺呢啲嘅垃圾嘅收集點咧，即係我哋嘅地方咧嚟到去增加我哋呢啲嘅廚餘嘅收集點咁樣。咁但係咧呢啲嘅硬件我哋嘅增強咧，就唔等於我哋做咗呢啲嘅時候咧，就一定係市民咧有足夠嘅支持度嘅，因為個支持度咧係十分嘅緊要。所以咧我哋會係不時咧係嚟到係去評核評估，就係社會喺呢一方面咧，對於我哋整個垃圾收費嘅支持度啦，對於即係我哋用唔同嘅方法嚟到做呢一個嘅垃圾收費嘅嗰啲嘅個支持嘅程度嘅成熟嘅程度咧，咁我哋先可以做一個決定。所以呢，呢一點咧，我哋覺得就唔係咧，即係一個咧係時間表可以講到嘅嘢，而係咧我哋不斷嚟去睇翻，不斷嚟到評核社會嗰個嘅情況，我哋先可以係決定到嘅。
局長話垃圾徵費咧再次推動唔到啦，其實你需唔需要問責？有冇人要問責咧？同埋其實成個政策醖釀咗近20年，咁多機構幫手準備咯。其實有冇即係你會唔會向佢哋道歉咧，講對唔住咧？同埋成個政策其實使咗咁多錢去推動啦，而家咁樣話宣佈就唔推行，其實需唔需要向市民納稅人交代咧？
或者呢個問題由我回答啦。實施呢個垃圾收費咧，係一個社會嗰個影響面咧係史無前例嘅。咁局長喺推動呢個政策上咧，其實不同階段咧都係盡心盡力。咁頭先我都講咗咧，之前2次嘅押後咧，其實有充分嘅理由。今次嘅建議去暫緩咧，亦都係一個務實正確嘅做法。咁亦都體現咗我哋政府咧係施政為民一個重要原則。咁我哋咧係支持局長嘅工作嘅做法嘅。
How will the government handle the 170 million spent on the charging scheme? And under what circumstances will the government implement the scheme or even give up the scheme?
The Secretary can answer this question.
Well, I think, well, as of now, the government, we have spent, 80 million, I think, in the project, in promoting, and preparing, and also in implementing, the waste charging scheme, including, the manufacture, production of the bags, and also the setting up of a distribution system, storage, etc. Yeah. And since we are planning to use these designated bags for promotion and educational purpose, and therefore the bags will still be used, and therefore it is not worth to be wasted. Yeah.
局長想問下咧，即係成個計劃，即係話個標靶咁多年啦，宣傳咗咁多年，有冇統計過其實成個宣傳期總共用咗幾多錢咧？跟住嚟緊呢一年嘅工作，有冇統計要用多幾多錢去達到即係局長就即係喺會上面所講嘅目標咧？同埋局長喺會上提嘅一年工作咧，點解要去到今年先至會提出咧？因為成個標都過咗多年，係咪覺得自己有冇失職咧？第二就係即係之前有講到話，即係覺得今屆政府任期都未必會再推呢一個垃圾收費，即係局長你可唔可以即係同大家講，喺呢個任期內你自己會唔會再次推動呢個垃圾收費，定係佢會即係壽終正寢咁？
或者我答你其中一部分嘅問題先啦，就即係譬如你話，咦呢個垃圾收費就傾咗好多年啦咁，但係咧大家喺一個事實咧，就係喺法例通過之後咧，就喺我哋喺本屆政府我哋上任咧，局方咧係做咗大量嘅工作呢啲工作咧喺譬如宣傳方面啦，就即係播咗萬幾次呢啲宣傳片，有4000多個嗰啲海報啊，喺不同嘅地點啊、交通工具啊展示，亦都做咗好多咧地區嘅解說同業界嘅解說，甚至同外傭嘅解說。咁所以咧，其實係做咗大量嘅功夫。咁大家如果睇翻個事情嗰個發展咧，喺舊年我哋係話頭先提過咧，就話本來係舊年年底去實施咧。當時其實唔係好多人出嚟講話做唔到嘅，咁係因為業界話因為係高峰期人手唔夠，咁我哋係押後啦。咁大家會睇到咧，其實喺今年年初就呢個係可能係人性咧。當呢個話4月1號實施咁呢個日期接近嘅時候咧，就變咗好多市民咧係提出嘅關注同埋呢個反對。咁我哋做呢個先行先試咧，其實喺裡面咧睇到好多其實之前都冇人討論過問題。咁所謂咧係叫做是非經過不知難，你真係要經過咗先至知道，咦實際原來有呢啲咁嘅問題。所以唔係話你之前去冇諗清楚啲嘢咩咁，即係好多嘢咧，你喺書面上啊，你喺嗰個法例上咧，就即係睇落去咧係冇問題，但係到一個深入去實踐嘅時候咧，就有啲問題就走出嚟。而啲問題咧係我哋必須要正視。咁大家都知道咧，喺即係由1月到而家咧，係有好多不同嘅調研，不同嘅調研咧，其實都係好一致咧，講咧係有7至8成嘅市民咧，其實係反對喺8月1號咧係實施呢個垃圾收費。咁我哋要施政為民，喺咁強大嘅民意之下，其實今次呢個暫緩咧係一個務實正確，甚至乎係唯一嘅決定嚟嘅。咁所以咧即係我想解清楚，大家知道唔係話點樣講咗20幾年，你到而家有啲嘢你先至發現咧。咁事實上好多嘢咧係新近先至浮現出嚟嘅。其他嘅請局長回答。
係，其實嗱，我諗我哋睇翻即係垃圾收費，我哋嗰個嘅目的係啲咩嘢咧？我哋目的都係希望可以達到減廢、推動回收。嗱，我想喺今屆政府我上任之後咧我已經係大力去推動咧，即係咧我哋呢一個嘅減廢回收嘅工作。所以頭先就提到好多嘅 我哋嘅資源其實都係用咗喺呢一方面。我舉一個例子，就係話咧本來我哋嗰個嘅綠在區，我哋全香港我哋都係得30幾個。我哋上場之後我哋而家已經係我哋會喺50個屋苑裏邊，我哋係增加綠在區嘅設施。咁我哋呢一個嘅廚餘嘅收集點我哋喺即係我哋上任之初，全香港約莫係咧即係有大約係170個呢一啲嘅廚餘嘅收集點。我哋而家增加到1100個咁所以喺呢一方面咧，我哋做咗好大量嘅功夫。實際上我哋都見到，就係譬如我哋喺家居嗰啲嘅廚餘嘅收集裏邊咧，我哋喺短短呢1年裏邊咧，我哋係由最初都唔夠，我諗都唔夠1噸啦。而家咧我哋咧係增加咗咧我哋咧差唔多係有成即係5倍，就係喺呢幾個月裏邊，我哋係增加咗。咁所以咧，我哋見到咧，我哋喺呢方面其實我哋真係做到好大量嘅功夫喺嗰個真係嗰個嘅回收物回收量嗰度咧我哋係數以倍數咁樣嚟到增加。咁亦都喺呢段嘅時間咧即係剛才我哋都有講到就係話啦固之然即係社會對於我哋用一個咁樣嘅垃圾袋呢個收方式嚟到做呢個垃圾收費咧，有好大嘅反對嘅聲音。但係社會因為我哋喺呢段嘅時間，我哋嘅宣傳、我哋嘅教育，以及咧大家所識嘅討論，成個社會對於而家減廢回收嗰個嘅認識、個認同，同埋真係亦都有好多嘅人咧係參與咗喺度開始實踐。咁我哋見到呢一個咧，其實係帶嚟一個好好嘅一個嘅改變。我哋覺得其實而家係一個嘅契機咧。剛才都有啲議員提到，我哋應該好好把握呢個契機，點樣去擴大我哋呢一個咁樣嘅減廢回收呢一個大家嘅認知，呢一個嘅文化點樣去建立。我哋同時，我哋喺硬件方面，我哋更加快嘅去增加我哋個回收配套嘅設施，再加強我哋嘅宣傳教育。咁我相信就係減廢回收嗰方面一定會有一個好好嘅長進，亦都希望成個社會我哋明白到就係咧我哋推動呢一個嘅垃圾收費，我哋唔係想收費，我哋只不過係希望即係藉住污捨自負呢個原則，鼓勵大家去做好嗰個嘅減廢，做好嗰個分類回收。咁我哋喺呢方面，我哋會繼續評核社會個整個嘅情緒同埋大家嗰方面個準成熟嘅程度。咁我哋喺呢一方面咧，我會努力繼續做功夫嘅。
最後兩條，前邊呢位。啱啱問指定袋嘅嗰方面，就本身啱先都講到嘅就係污染者自負啦。咁其實依家變咗免費派，會唔會已經失去咗本身嘅意義，同埋有冇諗過係有少少唔合理咧？同埋都想問指定袋嘅供應商合約會點樣處理啦？會唔會有啲賠償俾翻供應商？最後都想問多次，就係其實真係講到盡心盡力，但係其實呢個垃圾徵費都已經無限延期咗好多次，都想問多一次，就係其實局長會唔會需要都要問責，同埋甚至係下台咁樣咧？唔該。
我諗我頭先嗰個回答咧係好清楚即係局長我哋完全毋庸置疑，局長係盡心盡力去推動呢一個政策，但係大家係要接受一個可能唔想見到嘅現實，就係社會整體係未有咁嘅準備，即係對於呢個垃圾收費嘅認識、認同嗰個回收嗰個文化方面係仍然各方面都係有不足。咁其實推動呢個垃圾徵費咧，係唔可以淨係話靠我有一個法例，你如果唔跟咧，我就要罰你1500蚊咁樣樣。咁好大程度，如果係要有意思、有意義去推行而達到，大家唔好忘記咧，垃圾收費只係一個手段，最終嘅目的就係要減少呢個固體廢物。咁要達到呢個目的咧，其實一定係要成個社會要配合。咁成個社會配合係咩咧？除咗硬件我哋其實近年都已經係增加咗好多啦。但係大家亦都要知道咧，係唔係淨係話俾個數目你要增加到幾多咁先至係叫足夠？咁亦都有一啲嘅設施提供咗咧，其實嗰個使用率唔高嘅。咁呢個咧個症結都係我哋嗰個環保回收，可能嘅頭先喺議會有人提咗咧，就話市民對於呢樣嘢嘅認識係高咗，但係認識高咗唔等於嗰個認同嗰個意識，個意識高咗。咁所以我哋係未來嘅時間咧，一定係要即係強化我哋點樣去做呢個公眾教育咁先至變咗咧。喺有意義嘅實施垃圾徵費嗰度咧，先至係可以比較順暢。其他請阿局長回答。
係嗱，我諗即係大家喺見到我哋先行先試嘅時候，我哋都派一啲嘅袋嘅。咁但係我哋先行先試咧，嗰個嘅目的咧，就主要就係要揾出喺一個執行上邊有啲咩嘅問題。咁所以喺個過程裏邊咧嚇，我哋並冇特別咧走去咧嚇，去鼓勵或者協助咧嚇嗰啲參與者咧佢哋點樣做啊？咁就睇下佢哋嗰個嘅反應會係點樣。亦都睇下咧嚇中間參與咧嚇嗰啲嘅清潔工咧、啲前線工人咧，佢哋遇到啲咩困難啊咁樣。咁但係我哋都見到就係咧，即使喺一個咁樣嘅情況咧，我哋嘅先行先試咧嚇，我哋嗰啲嘅派啲指定袋咧，都提高晒咧嗰啲嘅居民咧嚇對於一樣嘢佢哋嗰個認識，對呢樣有個關注。咁所以實際亦都有好多個朋友同我哋講，即係好應該就係話咧嚇，即係利用多啲嘅派袋呢個方式咧，嚟到係讓出邊好多嘅市民咧都可以真係佢哋自己有一個嘅參與。再加上咧，我哋到時我哋會做好多嘅宣傳教育喺呢個上邊咧，我哋相信對於令到咧嚇更多嘅市民咧，佢哋明白啊點樣可以去減廢，點樣去回收咧，會更加有一個嘅幫助。因為我哋提供指定袋咧，我哋唔係話咧30日我哋俾30個袋嚟，我哋30日咧我哋會係提供20個袋，咁就會喺度教佢就係你點樣可以做分類回收，睇下20個袋你可唔可以足夠你一個月用咧咁樣。係嘛？咁所以喺呢一方面咧，我哋相信就呢個咁嘅參與嘅時候咧，嗰個嘅教育性意義咧，會係相當嘅大嘅。咁大規模做嘅時候咧，社會大家個一齊嚟到實踐嘅話咧，個教育性意義咧，必定係會好大嘅。你亦都問到話嗰啲嘅膠袋嘅生產嚇嗰啲會點樣咧？咁嗱，第一我哋未來一段嘅時間，因為我哋係會用呢一個嚟做教育嘅緣故咧嚇，我哋仍有一啲嘅袋嘅需求咧。咁亦都頭先我喺議會裏邊我都有講到啦，就話咧嚇，我哋嘅合約咧並冇係規定就話咧承諾我哋一定要做幾多個袋嘅。咁所以咧將來裏邊咧嚇，如果我哋真係數量上有啲變化嘅話咧嚇，我哋可以透過個合約啊，亦都係同我個生產商討論下咧，我哋點樣去安排，點樣做，跟翻個合約條款嚟到處理。咁喺方面我哋會同我哋商討嘅咁樣嘅。
後邊呢位係。
你好啊，想問下咧，即係預計未來一年會可能增加唔同地區嘅回收點啦。我話預計呢一年嘅開支會多幾多咧？咁同埋咧，我想問下副司長，其實即係會唔會擔心，因為垃圾徵費都即係兩度延期啦，會擔心會開壞先例，即係會俾市民感覺會原來政府立法都唔一定會去實行嘅喎咁樣。
其實施政咧，我哋都係要實事求是。即係如果大家你調翻轉你個問題講，就話如果我哋面對咁多嘅市民咧係有擔憂，同埋明知道社會喺各方面嘅準備不足，係咪都淨係因為話我有條法例喺度我要執行咧？咁我覺得咧反而呢一個做法咧係不負責任。即係政府一定要即係我哋係一啲你當日嘅政府，我哋面對一啲具體問題就作出具體嘅處理，係因時制宜嚇。係即係呢個係一定係要回應翻當時社會嗰個需要去做，就唔係話教條式因為我有條法例喺度啦，我一定要執行。咁第日我哋譬如話要達到呢個固體廢物，即係減少固體廢物呢個目的咧。頭先我哋都有講啦，我哋喺未來一年咧，我哋係諗下點樣優化呢個垃圾收費呢一個咁嘅制度嘅。咁其實裡面都係真係要睇睇現時呢個法例咧，係咪有啲地方咧，其實係咪即係適合我哋而家今時今日呢個情況咧咁樣。
Two English questions. First one, can you clarify whether the scheme is being shelved indefinitely? Second one is, does it amount to policy misjudgment or a lack of foresight from the government? Minister Choi, maybe?
頭先有啲佢未答完㗎，未答完，咪答埋後邊嗰個先。
同埋頭先一條係最後一條。
係啦。
係。其實我哋要擴大我哋嘅回收配套呢啲嘅工作咧，係我哋點樣都需要做嘅。咁所以咧，即係啦嚇。當然我哋今次根據我哋個先行先試嘅結果我哋希望可以喺未來一年盡快去擴大，可以咧幫助到咧即係咧市民咧多啲做一個嘅減廢一個嘅回收。咁所以我哋喺即係睇翻我哋喺而家個情況，我哋嗰個嘅人力。我哋香港幾個分佈點，我哋可以點樣做嘅時候，我哋定咗頭先剛才我講一個嘅計劃。至於具體嗰個資源方面嘅話咧，我哋仲要翻去同啲同事統計一下先。手頭上咧，我並冇咁樣嘅資料喺手嘅多謝。
唔該晒。
等佢哋。
唔緊要，唔緊要，等多一分鐘先，等多一分鐘 ，1 minute。我哋自己嗰個 cam 都要 set 一 set 先。
好。
你企埋，企埋一齊。
好啦。
去邊啊？Ada OK？ 請。
可以係咪？好，各位傳媒嘅朋友，各位香港市民，當局咧就剛剛咧就出席咗今日嘅聯席會議咧，就表示將廢物徵費咧就會暫緩執行。咁咧就我哋民建聯呢，其實一直咧都非常之關注呢個廢物徵費嘅實施方案究竟可唔可行。咁咧就亦都留意到咧，好多市民呢就係即係反對即係預期執行嘅。咁我哋最近做咗個民意調查咧，都有超過70%嘅市民呢都係反對預期執行。咁所以咧我哋見得到其實雖然我哋覺得呢個即係環保非常之重要，咁但係咧如果即係預期執行係會引起好大嘅擾民啦，甚至咧令到好多企業同埋市民咧覺得負擔太大，而政府又未準備好嘅話咧，我哋都認同咧係唔應該夾硬去執行嘅。咁所以咧我哋覺得今次政府延期執行咧，其實都係一個務實嘅做法，亦都係一個從善如流嘅做法。咁咧就我哋覺得咧嚟緊呢，其實最重要咧係有幾方面咧，政府一定要去做。第一咧就係教育。因為針對咧今次推行咗呢幾個月嘅先行先試計劃，同埋就住廢物徵費引起咗社會廣泛嘅討論啦。其實咧係好多市民呢都係非常之關心呢個回收啦，關心呢個減廢啦，同埋支持環保嘅。咁咧就以我即係去推動咗環保政策咁多年啦，其實咧而家呢段時間呢，係即係有史以來最多市民話支持環保同埋關心即係回收減廢嘅時刻。咁所以咧，我認為政府咧應該咧揸緊呢個機會咧，就係努力咁樣去做教育嘅工作，從小到大令到我哋嘅市民咧都明白即係回收減廢嘅重要啦，點樣可以乾淨回收啦咁。咁另外咧，亦都針對市民咧，就係非常之關心。好啦，我哋願意去支持回收啦。咁回收點樣回收法啦？去邊度可以回收啦？嘅問題咧，咁所以咧好多市民亦都針對話，我而家支持啦，但係你回收點不足回收配套不足，回收設施不足另外咧，我哋亦都好想回收埋廚餘，但係咧就冇足夠嘅廚餘機。下邊嘅回收桶又經常爆滿，等等呢啲問題呢，咁所以呢，我亦都希望政府呢千祈唔好停落嚟，要繼續咧去加呢個回收點，增加呢個回收嘅設施。嗱，咁亦都有好多市民呢，跟住就會問咯，好啦，我支持咗回收啦，啲回收物品去咗邊先？如果去咗堆填區嘅話呢，其實就不能接受啦。咁所以呢，政府之前亦都有提出過呢，就係可能遲啲會有一個立法嘅工作，去針對啲廢物嘅回收，唔可以即係回收嘅物品去咗堆填區。咁所以呢，回收物品嘅出路呢個問題呢，係市民非常之關心嘅。咁亦都係呢，我哋民建聯多年以嚟呢，亦都希望推動政府呢，就係實施呢一個嘅即係整個回收再造業嘅發展。咁但係可惜咧，我哋香港回收再造業咧發展呢，亦都係得唔到足夠嘅支持啦，同埋發展得比較緩慢。咁所以未來咧，亦都希望政府亦都唔好停，支持香港回收再造業嘅發展，令到我哋市民參與咗回收之後，所有嘅廢物咧都有一定嘅出路，唔會去咗堆填區。第四點，我覺得亦都非常重要嘅呢，就係政府亦都接受咗我哋民建聯嘅建議呢，就係會支持喺大灣區資源建設一體化，即係話呢，我哋大灣區應該共建一個無廢灣區。咁我覺得呢一個呢，係需要中央政府支持，亦都需要香港政府同大灣區嘅地方政府呢去商議。咁我希望呢，可以盡快落實。除咗喺香港，我哋加快呢去建設我哋嘅轉廢為能設施之外呢，亦都可以同大灣區嘅城市一齊合作，共建呢個無廢灣區。就住以上幾點呢，其實我哋覺得今次政府呢，其實 應該咧係已經吸取咗呢一個經驗同埋教訓，未來喺減廢回收上邊咧應該會做得更好。咁亦都我哋想重申嘅話咧，我哋認同係一定要繼續去推動環保，但係我哋認為咧就係減廢唔等於徵費。咁所以政府喺未來呢一年嘅實踐同埋推動上邊咧，如果揾到更加好嘅方法咧，我哋認為政府未必一定要實施呢一個徵費，反而我哋希望咧政府係用獎賞。即係更加多嘅獎賞去吸引市民呢係去加入呢一個環保回收嘅行列。咁所以我哋建議政府呢喺綠賞方面呢去大力去推動，咁同埋呢亦都由獎呢一個分去換禮物呢變為呢個現金獎賞，吸引更加多嘅市民去參與。咁其他我哋嘅建議呢係之前呢我哋已經同大家講過，咁所以我今日就唔重複啦。而家睇下我兩位同事有冇補充，如果唔係就回答大家問題。Thank you for your questions. We think that the waste charging scheme has a lot of facing a lot of problem. So the most important is practical and reasonable. So if we find that the present scheme is not practical and reasonable and have a lot of citizen objection, I think this is wise for the government to postpone or stop the scheme. We advise the government to work on a few areas immediately. First of all is education. The thing now is a very good timing for the government to promote recycling and reduction of waste, because going through all this education process, a lot of citizens think that they support environmental protection and they want to participate in waste reduction. However, they are facing a few problems. One of the problems is they don't know where they should put their waste. So we also ask the government to keep on building more ponds to get all the waste, recycling waste. And then another question that a lot of citizens ask is about where all the waste go after they put in the recycling baskets. If that go in the proper way or really doing a recycling. So that is why DAB keep on asking the government to support the recycling industry. So with a good recycling industry in place, then we will make sure that all the waste that the citizen put in all the recycling baskets will go into the proper place. And last but not the least, we think the government should keep on working with the central government and the cities in GAB to build recycling and waste management cycle together, so we can properly manage all the waste in the Great Bay Area. Thank you. 係。
首先想問下咧，即係啱啱會上面唔少議員都話，其實嚟緊個減廢工作就要設一啲指標啦。咁喺指標一方面兩位點睇咧？第二就係啱啱即係講到，其實如果揾到方法都可以唔使再推行個政策。其實個言下之意係咪就即係話民建聯都係唔傾向政府日後會重推呢個政策咧？即係要去到乜嘢位置或者社會去到咩支持度，其實先至覺得係重新推行嘅即係嘅時機咁樣。
我諗咧指標呢樣嘢咧就係嚟緊，我相信我哋喺立法會會同政府再進一步商討嘅。因為咧今日咧我哋見得到市民提出嘅意見咧，其實都非常之務實。咁例如回收點唔夠啊，回收設施不足啊，回收物去咗邊度，有冇出路啊，等等呢啲問題咧，其實今天係未完全可以解答到。咁既然設施不足嘅話咧，我諗我哋首先要解決嘅咧就係回收設施要足夠，出路問題要解決。咁跟住就係幾多市民去支持呢個環保回收。咁我相信即係去到合適嘅時機咧，其實大家都會睇得到。到時就究竟係咪應該用指定膠袋廢物徵費咧？我相信仲有空間去討論嘅。咁就正如我哋頭先所講，係咪一定係要用罰嘅方法咧？用獎嘅方法會唔會更加吸引咧？我相信係需要科學論證嘅。第二個問題係
仲係咪我嚟？
係好
講少少啦。首先民建聯咧係接受特區政府話暫緩今次嘅廢物徵費嘅建議嘅。啱啱你個問題咧，其中一個就係話，究竟民建聯係咪唔傾向特區政府翻嚟啊嘛？呢條條例其實我嗰個目標好清晰嘅，就係我哋民建聯係支持減廢嘅目標， 而徵費係其中一種手段嘅。咁今日特區政府都提出咗，例如灣區嘅廢物處理嘅一體化嘅方向啦，或者係會做好佢全面回收嘅網啊、教育啊工作亦都做得好嘅話咧，如果能夠有任何嘅方法，我哋民建聯係保持一個非常之開放同埋包容嘅態度。如果特區政府完成到減廢嘅目標嘅話咧，其實係咪仲需要去做廢物徵費咧？呢個就係我哋嘅想法。咁如果特區政府話譬如我哋民建聯曾經試過喺立法會嘅事務委員會都特別提過嘅，本身廢物徵費咧係一個屬於包底嘅一個方案嘅，即係做咗回收啦，做咗所有嘢啦，到最後咧要以徵費嘅方式去處理嘅。咁但係正正就係因為喺社會上面啦，呢啲嘅配套唔足夠啦，令到包底嘅壓力太大，市民亦都冇辦法去完全適應廢物徵費嘅措施，唔覺得佢方便，擾民嘅程度高咗，咁所以咧令到今次特區政府去進行一個暫緩嘅。咁所以咧目標同埋手段咧係要市民喺呢段時間係要認清楚邊一個先係主，邊個先係次。所以手段可以有多元，但係目標係我喺呢度係呼籲香港市民係全面一致，否則到我哋當初去推動呢件事嘅最初嘅目標就係其中一個就係話我哋嘅堆填區嘅飽和嘅壓力啦。如果做唔到嘅話，可能要擴建堆填區啦。呢啲嘅情況可能會再翻嚟嘅。咁所以呢，我哋應該再次聽聽市民嘅意見，特區政府嘅分析，究竟如何做到減廢嘅目標？我哋應該要將徵費嘅計劃暫時擺埋喺一邊。呢個時候係暫時係唔適宜討論繼續徵費，因為短期內都好困難㗎啦。我相信，好嘛？我希望回應到呢個問題。
有冇其他問題？
經濟部嘅想問下咧，其實政府喺法例通過3年咧，都用咗1.7億去做宣傳啦、推廣啦。咁依家唔實施咧，會唔會其實變成咗某一種浪費公帑嘅啫？嗰個目標，佢用完多錢都達唔成呢個目標。咁你哋民建聯係點樣睇咧？
其實呢段時間呢，就係大家都睇得到呢幾年政府其實都喺環保上面咧做到大量嘅工作嘅。如果大家睇翻數字嘅話咧，你會見到即係回收點咧，其實大量增加咗。大量增加咗，咁就另外咧就係呢段時間即係經過社會嘅討論咧，其實整個市民同埋社會嘅對環保同埋減廢嘅意識咧，亦都大力提高咗。咁你話喂，做到呢一點，使咗呢個錢，究竟值唔值得咧？咁我相信都見仁見智。咁但係咧就我又唔覺得話係完全係浪費咗，因為事實我哋係今天大家對環保嗰個關注度啦，對減廢嗰個意識嗰個高度，大家見得到咧。而家好多回收桶咧都即係滿座㗎，即係周圍都係所有回收桶都滿嘅。我哋香港從來未試過有咁嘅情形出現嘅。咁所以去到今日呢一度咧，我又唔可以話整個即係政府所做嘅工作完全係浪費啊，冇效益，係有一定嘅效益嘅。咁當然我哋期望政府可唔可以即係做得更早、更快、更好咁。咁我相信政府已經吸取咗教訓啦，即係未來係會即係再努力做得更加好。咁正如我頭先所講，我希望政府未來集中喺教育啦，喺呢個回收設施嘅配套啦，回收物品嘅出路啦，轉廢為能方面咧做得更快更好咯。
好，
好嘛，
好，
多謝晒，多謝晒大家，多謝晒 ，thank you。
冇，
唔該晒，唔該晒。
講故事嘅啦，費事。
唔該。
冇問題啦嘛，冇問題就。
Thank you，唔該晒，唔該晒。
交翻埋張凳。